The swoosh of the message sending was the loudest thing in the server room, cutting through the low hum of the cooling fans like a gunshot. My thumb hovered over the glass screen, not frozen from fear. No, it was the physics of it. One bad breath and my hand would shake. So I did what I always do when a system starts to fail. I controlled my breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 2, and slow out. Slowly, the tremors stopped. My thumb, steady now, pressed the pad against the phone's edge. The message was sent. Too late. I stared at the screen in disbelief. "You looked incredible in that meeting. I spent the whole hour wondering if you drink whiskey or wine on Friday nights." I wasn't a newbie. I wasn't some kid trying to impress a cute barista at the coffee shop. No, I was a high-level contractor for Bailey Media, brought in for one reason, to fix the problems no one else could see. But this wasn't a job thing. This was personal. And it wasn't meant for her. It was meant for someone else. Someone who didn't sign my paychecks. Someone who wasn't the CEO of this billion-dollar company. I'd spent 3 weeks trying to gather the courage to ask out the barista from the cafe downstairs. But now, I had accidentally sent a flirty text to the last person I ever intended. Ila Bailey. Her. I wasn't just some employee at this company. I was the guy who fixed things behind the scenes. I crawled through ceilings, ran cables, patched up security sensors. I was practically invisible to everyone in the building, except for her. And now, I'd gone and destroyed any chance I had of maintaining that professional distance. I stared at the text bubble, hoping for some kind of miracle. Maybe the network would crash, or my phone would somehow die. Something, anything, to keep her from seeing it. But the little bubble that said read 11:42 p.m. was a sign that she had already seen it. It was Friday night. What was she doing awake? I pushed the phone away, dropping it onto the desk and rubbing my face in my hands. I wasn't some nervous kid anymore, but right now, I felt like one. I was good at my job. I prided myself on being one of the best in the business, but I had just detonated my career with a simple, stupid mistake. Then my phone buzzed. I stared at it, not wanting to check, but I had to. The text was short. "Whiskey, neat, come up to the 40th floor, bring a glass." My chest tightened. I knew that tone, that CEO tone. And yet, it didn't feel like the reprimand I expected. I slid the phone into my pocket, stood up, and grabbed my jacket. It was time to face the music. If I was going down, I might as well make it interesting. The elevator ride to the 40th floor took 45 seconds. I counted every floor, my pulse hammering in my ears. I focused on the subtle flicker of the elevator display, something measurable to control my racing heart. My breath, steady, in, out. It didn't matter how much I prepared. I wasn't prepared for this. The doors slid open, and I stepped onto the plush carpet of the executive level, where the cameras watched every move, and the walls seemed to whisper secrets. Ila's office door was ajar. I knocked once, then pushed it open, and there she was. Ila Bailey. The woman who could end me with a single email. She stood by the window, the skyline stretched out behind her like a private ocean of lights. Her white blouse was casually rolled up at the sleeves, her hair down, soft, free from the boardroom armor she always wore. A lowball glass sat in her hand, the amber liquid catching the city lights. She turned slowly, eyes assessing. There was something in the way she looked at me. Something amused. Something that didn't belong in the CEO chair. "You brought the glass," she said, voice steady. "You told me to," I replied, my voice coming out steady, though my stomach felt like it was in knots. She didn't smile. Not quite. Instead, she poured a second drink, slid it across the coffee table. "Whiskey. Neat," she said, and it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I took the glass, but didn't drink. My eyes stayed locked on hers. "Ila, about the text. It was a mistake." I started. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. "I know." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "I didn't mean it to you. It was meant for someone else, quote." Her mouth curved, but it wasn't cruel. "Someone you want to impress." "Yeah," I said, swallowing hard. "Someone who isn't my boss." I could see the way her eyes shifted, not in judgment, but in quiet understanding. She lifted the glass to her lips, took a slow sip, and then her voice dropped, low and steady, as if she was making a decision. "Sitting here, across from me, you feel like a man who knows what he's doing, but I see you shaking." I didn't say anything. I knew it was true. She could see through the mask. I tried so hard to keep up. Her eyes didn't leave mine as she set the glass down. "Sit. You're vibrating." I obeyed, sitting at the edge of the leather sofa, careful to keep space between us, though the weight of her gaze felt heavy, like she could see all the way through me. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Do you actually drink whiskey?" Quote. I blinked. "Sometimes." "Neat?" she pressed. "Neat. Always." Her gaze softened for the briefest moment, then sharpened again. "Good. Then here's the truth on my side." Quote. I stared at her, waiting. Her eyes locked onto mine, serious now. "I don't invite contractors up here at midnight because I'm lonely," she said, her voice quiet but intense. "I invite them because I need them." My breath caught, and I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Need me for what?" Quote. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I need you to fix this." And just like that, I knew. I wasn't here for the apology I thought I'd have to give. I was here because, somehow, this mistake had turned into something I couldn't walk away from. What happens next? I had no idea. But I knew one thing. This was the beginning of something. Something bigger than the text, than my stupid mistake. I was in. Ila's office was like the rest of the executive level. Cold, precise, immaculate. But there was something different in the air now. A tension that hummed between us, like the quiet anticipation before a storm. Her eyes hadn't left mine since she asked me to sit, and even though the glass of whiskey sat untouched in my hand, it felt heavier than it should have. She walked back to her desk, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her back straight, the CEO mask slipping back into place. But I saw the flicker of something raw, something real, just beneath the surface. She was still a woman. Not just a title, not just the boss, but a woman who carried the weight of more than I could ever imagine. "I've got a problem," she said, her voice steady, but with an edge I hadn't heard before. "One that's too big for any of the men in my boardroom to handle, and I can't fix it alone." I stared at her, the words catching in my throat. "What do you need me to do?" Quote. Ila set her glass down and turned to face me, leaning against the desk. She was every inch the powerful CEO now, but there was something else there too, vulnerability, hidden behind her calculated gaze. "I need results by Monday," she said, her voice low. "I've got a board member, Peter Foster, who's trying to audit my department into the ground. He's trying to force a merger I don't want. And I can't let him get away with it." Quote. I raised an eyebrow. Foster. I knew the type. Money, power, and enough influence to make anyone bend. The kind of man who thought he could get away with anything. "You think he's after you because of the merger?" I asked. Ila's eyes hardened. "No, not exactly. He's after the leak in R&D. There's been information slipping out, and he's using it to push for control. But I can't find the leak, and I need you to help me find it before he does." I paused for a moment, trying to take it all in. The stakes were higher than I thought. If Foster found the leak first, it wouldn't just ruin her. It would ruin everything she had built. "What do you want from me?" I asked again, my voice steady. "I need you to be the one to find the leak," she said, her gaze never wavering. "But I don't want to do it the normal way. I don't want a paper trail. I don't want anyone to know I'm involved. If this goes wrong, I can't afford to be seen as the villain." I nodded slowly. This wasn't just about finding a leak. It was about protecting her company, her position, and possibly, in some way, protecting her too. "I understand," I said, leaning forward, "and I can do that, but I need something in return." Her eyes flickered. "What do you want?" Quote. "I need your trust," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not here to play games. I'm here to fix things. But if I'm going to help you, you need to trust me completely. No more secrets." Ila didn't answer right away. She looked at me for a long moment, like she was weighing my words. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I trust you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That simple sentence was enough. It was all I needed to hear. If she trusted me, I could do this. And if I was going to do it, I wasn't going to hold back. Not anymore. "All right," I said, standing up and crossing the room to my bag. "We need to set a plan in motion. We can't wait until Monday. If we're going to stop Foster, we need to move fast." I pulled out a small notebook and a pen, scribbling down ideas as they came to me. A decoy file. Something that looked important but was harmless. A trap that didn't rely on trust but on hard evidence. I looked up at Ila, her expression still intense, but now with a hint of something else. Something like respect. "We create a file," I said, flipping through the pages of my notebook. "A file that looks like proprietary R&D. It'll have all the right keywords, all the right metadata. But when someone opens it, it phones home with a signature. We'll know exactly who accessed it, when, and where. And once it's opened, we'll have everything we need to prove it was Foster." Ila raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we get him to open it?" Quote, "We wait," I said. "We wait for him to get greedy. We let him think he's found the treasure he's looking for. And when he does, we'll be ready." I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, but she didn't voice it. Instead, she stood up, walking to her desk and typing something into her phone. I watched her, but I didn't say anything. There was a new air between us now. A shift. We weren't just two people in a room anymore. We were partners in something bigger, something dangerous. "Done," she said, looking up from her phone. "It's authorized. But you need to make sure this goes exactly as planned. If anything goes wrong, it'll be my head on the chopping block." I nodded. "It'll go exactly as planned. We do this clean. No theatrics, no threats, just evidence." Ila's eyes flicked to my glass of whiskey, still untouched. "You haven't had your drink yet." Quote, "I don't drink when I'm working," I said, meeting her gaze. She smirked slightly, her lips curving up in that familiar, calculating way. "Then don't. But if you're going to stay here and help me, you'll need to stay focused, and I need you more than ever right now." I took a deep breath, my mind racing with the plan we had just set in motion. Foster wouldn't know what hit him. And by the time this was all over, I would have done more than just save her career. I would have done something I never expected. I would have saved us both. But first, we had to wait. And I hated waiting. 2 days. That's all we had. Foster would make his move. And we'd be ready. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't just be about saving her company. It was going to change everything between us. And that was only the beginning. The next 2 days felt like a blur of calculations and anticipation. The trap was set, the decoy file uploaded, and the clock was ticking. Every moment felt stretched, filled with a strange kind of suspense that hovered in the air between me and Ila. We didn't talk about it, not directly. We worked side by side in the silence of the executive suite. The storm outside relentless in its pursuit of the glass windows. The city sprawled beneath us, its lights twinkling like stars in a night sky that felt miles away from everything we were doing. But underneath that silence, there was something building, something unspoken. Every time I glanced over at Ila, I saw the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked from the screen to me, always calculating. I could feel it too, the pull, the magnetism between us. Electric and undeniable, but still distant enough to stay under control. For now, on the third night, as the rain hammered the windows like a constant reminder of the pressure we were under, we were back in her office. The hum of the city outside was drowned out by the quiet of the room. The only sounds were the faint clink of her glass as she set it down and the soft tapping of my fingers on the keyboard. I could tell something had changed in the air. The work we'd been doing, shaping the decoy file, gathering evidence, had quieted something else between us. A tension, but not the kind of tension that came from the work. It was something else, something personal. I glanced up at her. Her hair was loose, spilling over her shoulders in waves, and her blouse, a little wrinkled from hours of sitting, added a softness to the sharp lines of her usual CEO persona. She caught my gaze for a brief moment, then turned back to the papers in front of her. "How much longer do we have?" she asked, her voice calm, but there was a hint of impatience beneath it. "Not long," I said, keeping my focus on the screen. "Foster is too close. He'll take the bait soon enough." Quote. We both knew the same thing. Foster had to believe he was in control. He had to think that the information was slipping through Ila's fingers, that she was on the verge of collapse. That's how he would fall into the trap. His ego would make sure of it. But it didn't make the waiting any easier. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms above my head. The tension in the room was making me restless. "I need a break," I muttered, standing up. Ila didn't look up from her papers. "You know where the kitchen is," she said, her voice still clipped, as though she had to fight against the growing exhaustion. I nodded, making my way toward the small kitchen area off to the side. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to confront what was happening between us, what had been happening since the first moment we shared that quiet charged drink together. I poured myself a glass of water, hoping it would cool my thoughts. The soft buzz of my phone startled me, and I glanced down to see a message from McCoy. "The guards are watching the stairwell. Foster's making his move. It's now or never." I stared at the screen for a long moment. This was it. I didn't have time to think about it any longer. I had to act. I walked back into the office, my footsteps a little heavier than usual. Ila was still at her desk, her eyes fixed on the screen, her face unreadable. The quiet tension was unbearable now. I slid the phone onto the desk in front of her. She glanced at it, then back up at me, her eyes sharp. "It's time," I said, my voice low. She didn't need me to explain. She knew exactly what I meant. "I know," she said, setting her pen down. "Let's do this." We didn't speak for the rest of the night. It wasn't a question of trust anymore. There was no room for it. This was a battle, one we had to win on our terms. We had to stop Foster before he made his next move. And we had to do it clean. The minutes crawled by as we waited, both of us silent, both of us watching the screen, waiting for the signature. Then, like a lightning strike, the signature came. The file had been opened. I looked at Ila. Her face was unreadable, but I saw the tension in her jaw, the slight tightness in her shoulders. She didn't need to say it out loud. We had everything we needed, but Foster wasn't the only one we were after. We had to be careful. He'd be expecting us to react, to strike back hard and fast. But that wasn't our play. "Now we wait for him to make his mistake," I said, leaning back in my chair, trying to keep the calm. Ila didn't answer. She just looked at me, her gaze steady, calculating. She didn't trust me just as a contractor anymore. She was trusting me as something more. Minutes passed, and the quiet in the room became unbearable again. Then, my phone buzzed. It was McCoy. "He's made his move. Foster's at the conference room. The guards are distracted. You've got one window. Get in. Get the evidence." "Let's go," I said, standing up. I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. Ila was already moving toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor as she crossed the room. "Keep it clean," she said, her voice a little quieter now, almost like a command. "I always do," I replied, my voice steady. This was it. We were going after Foster now, and nothing was going to stop us. As we stepped out into the corridor, I realized something. This wasn't just about the evidence anymore. This wasn't just about exposing Foster and saving Ila's company. It was about something else, something bigger, and in that moment I knew, whatever happened next, we were both in this together. The hallway felt too quiet, too empty, despite the cameras hidden in every corner, watching our every step. It was late, far later than anyone should have been working, but that was the advantage we had. The building was practically empty, and Foster, too arrogant for his own good, was too sure of himself to keep his guard up. I glanced at Ila as we moved down the corridor, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. She was focused, her eyes ahead, her posture perfectly composed as always. But I could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched, like she was itching to do something. "Are you ready?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice low. The last thing we needed right now was to draw attention. She glanced at me, her lips pressing into a tight line. I've been ready for this for a long time. We reached the executive suite, the door already ajar. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with the faint glow of city lights creeping in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was almost peaceful in here, but I knew better. There was nothing peaceful about what we were doing. Ila's eyes flicked to the desk where Foster's laptop sat, a quiet beacon of the betrayal we were about to expose. The decoy file had done its job. The signature was now in our hands. But now came the harder part. We had to catch him red-handed, make sure we had the evidence that would hold up under scrutiny. I moved quickly, my hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding through me. I pulled out the tools I had in my bag, keeping an eye on Ila as she stood by the desk, her arms folded, her gaze fixed on the door. "I'll be quick," I muttered as I popped the back panel of the laptop and began extracting the storage drive. Ila didn't reply. She was too focused on what was happening, too focused on the risk we were taking. If Foster realized what we were doing, we were both finished. He was far too connected, too dangerous. But there was no turning back now. I heard a faint sound, footsteps approaching. My heart skipped. I froze, glancing up at Ila. Her eyes were wide for a moment, but then she was moving, sliding out of the room like a shadow, her movements quick and deliberate. I followed, keeping my breath steady. We didn't have much time. Every second counted now. We crept down the hallway, my mind racing. My hands tightened around the drive I had just stolen from Foster's laptop. The evidence. It was in my hands now. As we reached the stairwell, the echo of footsteps grew louder, and I knew we were running out of time. The guards were getting close. We're almost there. I whispered to Ila, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my chest. She nodded once, glancing behind us, but she didn't break stride. We were getting closer to the service exit. McCoy had already texted me. He'd created a window of opportunity for us, but it wouldn't last long. Once Foster realized what had happened, all bets were off. We reached the stairwell, the heavy metal door creaking open as we slipped through. The quiet of the building was interrupted by the faint sound of a door opening, the low murmur of voices. I didn't turn to look. We were too close now. We couldn't afford to stop. We made our way down the stairwell, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the narrow space. My hand was still gripping the anti-static bag with the drive inside, and I could feel the weight of it, the pressure of everything we were about to do. We reached the exit, and as I pushed open the door, I caught a glimpse of McCoy standing outside, his arms crossed, eyes scanning the corridor. He gave us a quick nod, and I could see the slight tension in his posture, as if he knew the danger we were still in. "We have the evidence," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "Now we need to get this to Ila's legal team." McCoy didn't answer right away. He just watched us, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Then, finally, he gave a sharp nod. "Go! I'll cover your back." We didn't waste time. We made our way out of the building, the cool night air hitting us as we stepped onto the street. The city stretched out before us, but everything felt distant now. The weight of what we had just done, the risk we had taken, it was all pressing down on me. We didn't talk as we walked. There was no need. We both knew what was at stake. Ila's car was waiting for us just down the street, the engine already running, the headlights cutting through the darkness. We climbed in, the tension still thick in the air, but there was a different kind of focus now. I handed her the drive. She didn't ask any questions. She just took it, her fingers brushing against mine for a fraction of a second. "Get this to legal," I said, my voice rough. "And make sure Foster doesn't get away with this." Ila didn't respond right away. She just nodded, her jaw set, her eyes focused on the road ahead. There was no going back now. As we drove through the quiet streets, the gravity of what we had done settled in. We had the evidence, we had the proof. But the fight wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. We weren't just up against Foster anymore. We were up against an entire system that would do anything to protect its own. And we were right in the middle of it. But somehow, in the midst of it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about saving her company anymore. It wasn't just about making sure Foster was exposed. It was about something more, something neither of us could quite name yet. And that made it even more dangerous. The drive to the legal team's office felt like it took forever, even though the streets were empty and the car hummed quietly beneath us. The city that had felt so alive hours ago now seemed cold and distant, its buildings towering over us like silent witnesses to what we'd just set in motion. I could feel the weight of the drive in my hands, the bag with the drive still tucked in the seat between us. Ila's hands gripped the wheel tightly, her knuckles white, and I could tell she wasn't letting herself relax just yet. She wasn't going to until this was over, until she was sure that Foster couldn't find a way out. We arrived at the legal offices just before dawn, the city beginning to stir as the first rays of light touched the skyline. We didn't speak as we climbed out of the car and walked through the building's entrance. Inside, it was all sleek, modern architecture and the smell of strong coffee. The legal team was waiting. They'd been briefed, prepared for the evidence we brought. As we walked into the conference room, I could see the team, sharp, focused, ready. But even with the plan in motion, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. This was the moment where it all came together or fell apart. Ila stepped forward, moving with the kind of confidence that only came from knowing you were right, knowing that every step you'd taken had led you to the truth. She placed the drive on the table, her fingers brushing against it for just a moment before she stepped back, standing beside me as we both waited. One of the lawyers plugged the drive into a separate terminal, the screen lighting up as the files began to transfer. Foster's files, his credentials, everything we needed to prove that he had done exactly what we'd suspected. The connection, the timestamps, the network paths, and finally, the damning proof. Foster had opened the decoy file, and he'd done it with his own credentials. The room went silent as the evidence appeared on screen, each piece falling into place. Foster hadn't just been trying to steal R&D information. He'd been using company resources to cover his tracks, making sure no one would catch him. Until now. Ila stood tall beside me, her eyes never leaving the screen as the legal team began taking notes, logging everything carefully. But I could see it in her eyes, the weight of it all. She wasn't just protecting her company anymore. She was taking down a threat. Someone who had thought they could control her, someone who had underestimated her. "We're done," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Now we need to make sure the board knows exactly what happened." The lawyer nodded, already on his phone, making arrangements to brief the board. Ila and I stepped out of the room, the weight of everything we'd done finally settling over me. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know what to say. We were both too tired, too worn out from the past few days. But as we reached the elevator, I glanced at her. She was quieter now, the sharp edges of the CEO slipping back into place. "You did good," I said quietly. "You got your hands dirty for this. You didn't just hide behind your title." She met my gaze with a faint smile, but there was something more in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. A softness, but a sharpness too. "I had no choice," she said. "You didn't just help me take down a threat, Azrael. You showed me I wasn't the only one who knew what it meant to fight for something." Quote, I felt a strange kind of warmth spread through me. It wasn't what I had expected. I had thought I was just doing my job, getting the evidence, saving her company, but somehow, it felt like we were fighting for something else now, something more. We reached the parking garage, and as we walked to the car, the night air now cool against my skin, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It couldn't be, not after everything we'd been through. Ila paused before getting into the car. She looked at me, her eyes holding something steady, something grounded. "I know you're not in this for the praise," she said, "but you need to know something. What you did, it meant something. To me." I nodded, but before I could say anything, she gave me a small smile. It wasn't playful, not flirtatious, just real. "You still haven't had that drink," she said, her voice soft. "And you owe me a toast. The best mistake you ever made." I smiled back, the tension between us shifting, a new understanding between us that I couldn't quite put into words. "All right," I said, finally, "to the best mistake I ever made." And when we shared that drink, when I held her gaze and she held mine, I knew that no matter what happened next, no matter how the board reacted or how the world shifted around us, I wouldn't regret it. Because this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about trust, about finding someone who saw you, really saw you, for everything you were, And I knew, deep down, that Ila Bailey wasn't just the CEO I worked for. She had become something more. Something I couldn't walk away from. And for the first time, I was okay with that.